Did you know that there is one thing that will make all the difference in the world in your marriage if you first realize it and then you actually live by it? So, whether you're a husband or a wife or someone who plans to get married one day, this episode is for you.
In order to make real progress in our marriages, we need a bit of the shoot it to me straight kind of encouragement. So, we're going to get personal and we're going to be very transparent as we look at where we are in light of where we should be in our marriages.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest up front. So my marriage hasn't always been perfect. It's still not always perfect. Is yours?
Of course. No, I'm just kidding.
But I'm afraid that many marriages are struggling really to even stay afloat. And it doesn't have to be that way. Many marriages could be sailing the clear blue sea instead of just struggling. And I remember a young wife who came to me several years ago, and her heart was really hurting. Her marriage was like, it was not turning out to be what she had planned it to be. Her husband wasn't exactly who she thought she had married. Her dreams of happily ever after were really turning into something like, hope we make it till next year.
Yes, marriage is seldom easy. You may have heard this quote before. It says, marriage is like flies at a screen door. Half are trying to get in and half are trying to get out. And unfortunately, that is often really true. We find ourselves wondering, is this what God meant when he came up with the idea of marriage? So for the sake of those marriages that are hurting, and for the sake of the husbands and wives who long to make their marriages the best that they can be, let's really go where we need to go today so that all of our marriages can be what they can and what they should be. So, are you ready? Here goes. The number one thing that we can all do that will change our marriages is to realize, here it comes, our marriages are not about us. Okay? Shock. Hello. You know, we don't teach that to our children very well. I remember watching this show one time, and it was a husband, a man and a woman that were getting married on TV. And the lady was giving the vows, and every single one of her vows was all about everything you do to make me feel wonderful. You're there for me. You provide for me. You always show up in the nick of time. Not one thing did she say about what she was going to do to offer to the marriage. It was all about what she was going to get. And I was thinking, ooh, that's not going to be good for him. He got gypped out on that one.
He really did get gypped out on that one. It sounds to me like she made that marriage all about her.
Yes.
And marriage really is more about honoring God than it is about how we feel or what we think, or is our husband or our wife treating us the way we think that they should. I know this is tough stuff, but it's stuff that we need to hear because it's true.
Right. I mean, we get caught up in the emotion of the moment, and we're wounded by words that should have never been said. And then we start fights. And then before you know it, there's a war raging inside the walls of our own home.
And sometimes we're on the offensive. Sometimes we're on the defensive. Other times we struggle with anger and forgiveness or feeling unappreciated or even unwanted. And I realize that as we're sharing about marriage, many of you are in a very difficult place in your marriage. So please know that this isn't intended to minimize your pain or your predicament.
I remember sitting in a marriage class when I was very young, and the teacher said, it doesn't matter how much one person wants the marriage to make the marriage work, that marriage requires two people to be committed to it. So there are circumstances when one person may be unfaithful and leaves the marriage, or maybe you're in an abusive situation. We're not suggesting in any way that you would stay in a place where you are unsafe. There are dangerous situations that you need to protect yourself. But too many times people want to use that as an excuse to run from the slightest discomfort or sometimes even the boredom. But here's the thing, marriage can be wonderful, but sometimes it can be hard and uncomfortable.
Yes, but even in the midst of the muck and the mire, our goal is to glorify God. And victory in even the worst situations is not about winning the fight, but victory is found in focusing on God, trusting the Lord, and glorifying Him no matter what it is you're going through.
And I like what you said. It's not about winning the fight. And I have been guilty of trying to do just that.
Me too.
I hope I'm getting better in my old age.
I am too. I want to be right. I want, you to get my point, right?
Right.
And it's not about that. It's about glorifying God. So listen, my friend, I know that this might be difficult to hear, but whether your marriage is good or bad, our marriages are not about us. Our marriages are about how we can honor God, and through it, just to live for His glory, to be a wife or to be a husband that glorifies God, and to make our marriage as a reflection of Christ and the church, this beautiful, inseparable union, this oneness, this unshakable foundation of unconditional love. And as Christians, for some reason, it's easy easier for us, and I've noticed, maybe I'm just talking about myself, it's easier to be more patient and kind and long-suffering and selfless with those outside the walls of my home. But it is in the walls of our home with the ones that we love the most that we should be more patient, more kind, more selfless, more loving. And so here are 3 biblical principles that teach us that our marriages really are about Jesus and not about us.
Now, that was really good. I mean, I really appreciate that we are so often so loving and caring and patient with everybody else when we really should be that in our homes, but we tend to not be that way.
Well, and I think it's because one of the reasons it's easier is because it's easier to put on that heart and attitude of selflessness, per se.
Right.
For a short period of
Instead
time.
of really be it.
Because that can be a mask. And it can even be real. But when you're inside the home, it's 24/7.
Yeah.
And our family sees the worst of us.
That's right.
Instead of the best of us, which is what we want everybody else to see. Why would we not want our husbands and our children to see that too?
Right. That's so good. Anyway, I interrupted our 3 biblical principles.
But it's good stuff. It's all about marriage. So here are 3 biblical principles that teach us that our marriages are really all about Jesus and not about us.
Yes. And if we put them into practice, it can make our marriages better than we ever dreamed. So here's number 1. Marriage is to be a picture of Christ and the church. Ephesians 5:31 and 32 is part of a wonderful passage that presents the marriage and church parallel. It says, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church.
And I think that's so important, don't you? That
yes,
we've kind of lost that whole oneness factor that Jesus was talking about in our modern idea of what marriage is.
Absolutely, because everybody is so individual and I can do whatever makes me happy. And we forget that we're really one now. And 2, I think it's super important because in our world today, there's such an attack on marriage because I believe just because of this, because it is supposed to be a picture of Christ and his bride, and people don't like that.
Right. And I agree with you so much. And what we need to remember that when we do something against our spouse, if we're one, we're actually doing it against ourselves. We're hurting our own selves.
That is so good.
So, that we're losing all of that oneness and that it is such a picture of Christ and the church. So, number 2, everything we do, everything is to glorify God, even our marriages, right? I love the passage that we find in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31, because it has ministered to me in every area of my life, because it really deals with every area of our life. So, whether you eat or drink, like the most menial things you can do, right? Eating or drinking. Whatever you do all to the glory of God. And this is easy to live out when life is sweet and everything's going well, but it's not so easy to live out when you're in the trenches. And we all face days like that, right? When we feel like there's a war going on in our hearts and in our homes. But God is glorified most when we are walking through those difficult days and giving him glory anyway.
Yes, and it's not always easy to glorify God when your heart is hurting and your marriage is hard and you can't get past the pain and the hurt. But that is when you focus your effort on offering your obedience as a sacrifice to God. The way you choose to respond demonstrates that you honor God in spite of those hard times.
So number 2 is that our marriages are really about honoring and glorifying God in the midst of them, whether they're hard or whether they're easy. So number 3 is your vow to your husband or to your wife is really a vow that you have made to God.
That's right.
And I remember when I wrote my Bible study on Ecclesiastes, Understanding What Matters Most, one of my big light bulb moments that I had was when I read Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and discovered that not only does God require us to fulfill our vows, but that I had actually said I do to a whole lot more than just till death do us part.
That is monumental. I never thought about that before.
Yeah.
That it's not just till death do us part. It's all the stuff you said. Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. Let me read Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 4 through 6. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you to sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger. My vow was a mistake. Like, don't go and say, listen, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to promise that. Why should God be angry at what you say and destroy the works of your hands? And I remember after reading those verses, I was trying to mentally retrace the vows that we had made on January 31st, 1987, and I couldn't remember them all. And it was kind of grieved me because I wanted to know what I said, but I am pretty sure that I even said that dreaded word, obey.
Yes. Well, I know that I said that. I know that I did because I specifically wanted to, because that is my heart's desire. And I can't say that I always do obey, but I really want to.
We need to remember, too, when we're talking about obedience, there are some things that supersede, of course, obedience. If your husband asked you to do something harmful or something that's contrary to God's will, there are some things that supersede that.
Yes, because really obedience to your husband at that point is really obedience to God. And that makes it more fun when it's obedience to God. So let's talk about, why does all of this matter?
Well, it matters because when we are determined to make our marriages all about Jesus and a whole lot less about us, then we will consider those binding words that we said when we stood before the Lord and entered holy matrimony as something very sacred, and know that we are accountable to keep that which we vowed many, many years ago.
And that matters. So let's talk about, how are we going to practically apply all of these things to our lives? When Ronnie and I first got married, some friends gave us a shower, and I remember one of them had written in a card, "Pursue holy matrimony." And that phrase really stuck with me. It is such a powerful statement when you think about that. Holy matrimony is something that we are to pursue, and it's something that we need to pursue daily. And it's not just matrimony, but it's holy matrimony, because it's before God that we're making this vow. Now, I write that in all of the newlyweds cards because I think it's such a noble goal that we pursue holy matrimony. So how do we pursue holy matrimony? Well, going back to the very beginning, by making it all about Jesus and not about us.
And I love that you talked about holy matrimony like that, because I have never heard it shared like that. But when you think about the word holy, set apart marriage.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful.
Well, I love
That's
that.
beautiful.
And it's something, I just learned something big time, that you pursue it every single day. This is so good. Okay, so the way we talk to our husband is a way that we can glorify Christ.
Right.
The way that we choose not to talk about our husband in front of others is a way that we can glorify God. The way that we treat our husband in the good and the bad and the ugly situations of our lives, that's an opportunity for us to glorify Christ. And I use that word opportunity. It's so important that we realize that every time we're in a hard place. I remember years ago, my husband and I got into a fuss. We both have like very strong personalities, and so sometimes we'll get in a fuss. And I remember the Lord was kind of changing my perspective of how to look at our struggles and our arguments. And the Lord showed me I need to look at this as an opportunity to glorify God. And so we'd get in a fight, and I'd be like, okay, how am I going to glorify the Lord in this? And I start looking at it a little bit differently. And the way we serve our husband is a way that we can glorify the Lord.
Right.
Now, the serve thing, some of the worst responses I got on my blog was when I said, I love to serve my man, or something like that. It was a post that I did. And people were coming back to like, why would you serve your husband? I'm thinking, well, you serve your wife by giving her coffee in the morning. But we need to look at marriage differently, right?
Yes.
And the way we submit, as you mentioned, to our husbands.
And can I say something there?
Yes, absolutely.
We're so afraid of that word. And we are going to do an episode on that, because we do not need to be afraid of that word. And it is not degrading to submit, but we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah.
But I just want to point that out.
Yes, because it means so much more. We're going to go there.
Yes.
But it means so much more than what we tend to think of it
Yes.
as meaning. But the way we submit is a way that we honor the Lord.
Right.
And the way we pray for our husbands is a way that we can glorify Christ. And I've often said most of my wife life is spent praying for my husband. And the way we choose to meet his need instead of worry about him not meeting our own, that's a way we can glorify Christ. And finally, the way that we don't focus on our unmet expectations in marriage, hello, that's a way that we can shift our focus on the Lord and glorify him.
Yes. And it's such a privilege to be a wife, because we were talking about this earlier, that there are certain things that only I can do for my husband.
Yes.
And something that I learned from you, Stephanie, was that you said, not only are you a wife, you asked the Lord to help you be a good wife, but do you remember that you used to pray, Lord, help me to be Donald's wife?
Yeah, be the wife that he needs me to be, not just a godly wife, but the wife he needs me to be, because only I can be his wife.
Yes.
And when I pray for my husband, when you pray for your husband, or if you're a man and you pray for your wife, nobody knows them like we do. Nobody knows his strengths or his weaknesses like I do. Nobody knows his potential like I do. So I can pray for him like nobody else can, and
That's
should
right.
pray for him him like nobody else will.
That's right. And I think about that a lot. Thank you for that example, because I think about it a lot with my husband. Like, how can I be Ronnie's wife? And when we make our marriages all about Jesus, then Matthew 6:33 really comes alive as we seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, even in our marriages, then all these things will be added unto us.
Yeah, all of those things, we tend to look to our husbands to meet all of those needs, all those emotional needs, physical needs, all of those needs. But our husbands were not created to meet every need we have. Only Jesus
right.
can have all those things added into us, all those needs that
Right.
we have.
Right.
So I love that Matthew 6:33, it applies to our marriages as well.
Right.
So listen, the one thing that you and I can do to really change our marriages is to make our marriages all about Jesus and not about ourselves.
That's right. And when we realize that our marriages are not all about us, then we live our spouse life the way that glorifies God, and that will radically change our marriage and make them all that they can be and all that they should be.
And it's not that they will be perfect, okay? Because in reality, yeah, there is no marriage that is perfect because it's made up of imperfect people. But it can be much better than it is when you and your spouse are focused on making your marriage all about Jesus instead of all about yourself.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for watching or listening today. And if you found this episode to be helpful in any way, then please like and share and subscribe. And if you want someone to pray for you or you like encouragement in your marriage, then please leave a comment below, or you can find us at whatsthebiblesay.org. We would be honored to do that with you. Until next time, remember what the Bible says. They are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate.